Hello.
Hello and welcome. In this lecture we're going to be pulling apart the modular asset pack to figure out what building blocks we've got and use that to put together our first design. Let's dive in. So here's the project. I've closed it and reopened it, and you can see we're in our dungeon level that's completely black at the moment. So we need to have a think about how we're going to populate this level. Well, first things first, let's go to our content drawer, and I want to open up the Medieval Dungeon demonstration level because we're going to pick this apart and try and figure out how the modular system of assets works. So the first thing to note is that it's quite hard to understand what's going on with all this moody lighting going on. So there's a button in the top left of the viewport that says lit, and this is the default mode that we're in, but you can actually view the scene in an unlit mode or a wireframe or lots of other options here. So if we click on unlit, you can see that this just shows us the textured surfaces of our meshes without actually giving us any of the lighting to confuse things. You could also have chosen wireframe, and that doesn't even texture the surfaces, but it can be really hard to figure out what's going on in this view. So we're going to switch back to the unlit view instead. And then the way I like to take apart these levels is to literally take them apart. So I go, okay, well, this floor looks interesting. Let's click on it and go, oh, okay, there's the outlines of a chunk of floor. This is what it means by being modular, is that the floor is made up of loads of tiles that are all the same size. And if I wanted to check that out and see what size this is, then just move the tile. And you're going to see, okay, that's what the tile looks like. Cool. Okay, what else do we have? What about this wall? Is this something interesting? Yeah, okay, so it's created another tile here that acts as the wall, and you can see that actually the plank of wood and the chains are all separate actors here entirely. So you've got this wall, and it looks like the wall is the same size as the tile. So this is a modular set where things try to match up with each other. They have the same set of standard sizes. We've also got a ceiling panel, which is a similar size. We've got these arch panels. You can see, I dip down a little bit and have a look at the arch panel, you can see there's a couple of different building blocks. It's very much like Lego. If you've ever played with Lego, you've got a single piece, you've got a double piece, you've got this triple piece here as well, then you've got the central block. And what about these pillars? Let's have a look at the pillar. Yep, that's just its separate thing, and we've got the arches are separate as well. Now, you might want to be making a note of the name of these meshes so we can bring them into our own scene later. So if I click on the floor, you can see that the floor mesh, I click on general and scroll down to the static mesh selected and hover over it, you can see it's under the dungeon folder and it's called SM floor. Now I did mention that the crypt is slightly different down below. So down below we've got a slightly different looking floor, and if I hover over the mesh there, it's called crypt floor. It's actually slightly smaller, I think. But we can easily check this out by going to a little 4-pane view that we can get to in our viewport. At the top right, there's a little 4-pane icon. Click on that. Then that splits out our viewport into the 3D view that we're used to, but also a top-down, a right side, and a back side view of our level. And we can move around this to see what the different sizes of things are. In fact, if you were to middle click in this view, you can see it actually starts counting in Unreal units. So I can try and select from the top to the bottom and see that the floor is 500 units or 5 meters. And I could go and have a look, and it seems like the floor is the same in the upper levels. So if I select a floor, there's just a straightforward SM floor, and then middle click and drag to the bottom, you can see, aha, no, it's not. It looks like it is, but it's actually 600, so it's 6 meters. So the upstairs works on a different scale to the downstairs, and we'll have to just bear that in mind, that these are actually slightly different scales, and we may want to choose to use just one of them or multiple. We can see that we've got stairs as a component that we can use. They're modular as well, so you can make the staircase as long as you like so. And we can have a look at the ceiling height as well. So if I take the back view and I have a look at one of the crypt walls, so if I look down in the crypt and select one of these walls like that, and you can see the mesh is called crypt wall. And if I go and find that highlighted wall in one of my side views, then we can check out how tall a wall is in the crypt. Looks like it's 450 units versus perhaps a wall that's up in the dungeon. Select a dungeon wall, and we can see that the dungeon wall's height is 600. So much higher ceilings in the dungeon. So let's take stock of what we have with this modular asset pack. The main components here are floors, ceilings, and walls. These are essentially the building blocks of our level. We could start off just by using floors, ceilings, and walls to build out the vast majority of our level. We can then prettify and beautify this by adding pillars and arches on the corners and on the edges just to make it stick together architecturally. We've also got these cell walls to build out cells inside our dungeons. We've also got stairs. These are architecturally obviously important. If you want to have a multi-level dungeon or crypt or whatever, then you're going to need to use stairs to bridge the gap between the two. And then we've got lots and lots of variations on the theme. So we've got walls, but we've got different types of walls as well, so that it's not monotonously always looking the same. So with all these building blocks, I'd like you to design your own level. And here's the brief. So remember the sizes of your modular assets. We've got 600 wide elements. We're going to be doing basically a floor plan design of our level. So think about the sizes, whether you're going to want to use crypt elements or whether you're going to want to use dungeon elements. And include at least 2 levels so that we have somewhere to use our staircase and a little bit of intrigue and interest, and create multiple areas blocked off by some sort of obstacle, doors or secret walls, secret passages, a trapdoor, that sort of thing, which we can later add a moving component to so that we can open it up and the player can explore the level
mas
fully.
agora o
And ask yourself,
próximo
what is
vai
the
eu
puzzle
arrumei
going
aqui,
to
eu
be?
achei
What's going to make it challenging for the player to find the way through your level and explore your design? So pause the video, have a go, be creative, and be inspired by other students' work. So once you've made a design, doesn't matter if you don't think it's particularly good, go and share it in the discussions for this lecture. Pause the video and have a go. Hello and welcome back. So I think it's quite instructive for us to take a look at literally the first drawing I drew of the level that we're going to be building, and it's pretty rough, so I just warn you, it needs some talking over. Basically, this is as rough as it gets for a level design sketch, right? So we've got over here the entrance doors, and I just kind of drew a pair of doors. My drawing's not particularly good here, as you can see. I had a table and chair, just like they had in the demo level, and then I've got 4 cells here, and we know that we've got this kind of blocky level design, so we've got 1 square here, then an empty square, then a square here, 2 empty squares in the middle, and then an empty square here, empty square, square, etc. Then I've got a staircase that leads down to the next level, and we've got a slightly smaller set of things down here in the crypt. What I had originally considered, and I don't think I'm going to do this actually in my final design, but I'd considered we have a corridor that goes both ways, and it initially looks like, where do you go? And there's this actual secret pit here that drops you through, and then you've got the challenge of trying to find your way out in this under corridor here. And in the under corridor you have to go and steal something. It gets blocked off by some rail over here, and so you need to put a vase in its place. But then you've also got to push a coffin from, or pull this table over here so that you can step up out of the secret pit again. So I had a few ideas of the different kind of puzzles that we were going to do, but I've decided to simplify this down to just the corridor that leads to this little section with a rail that blocks it off. Anyway, that's my very basic sketch. Obviously, you can spend more time on this, but it's just to get an idea, and once we get in and building our level, you may find that your ideas change. So I'll see you in the next video. Hello and welcome. In this lecture we're going to be making this level from scratch using the assets in the asset pack and modularly laying out every single one of these 260 almost actors and making a level that looks something like this. And we're going to keep our outliner nice and organized at the same time by using folders. Let's dive in and see how this is done. So let's start by opening up our new level, which is the dungeon level. It's in the root of content for me, and I'm going to go ahead and open it. It's completely blank, and we want to be in our 4-pane view here in order to be able to place things down nice and easily. So what we're going to do, well, I felt bad for leaving you with this scrappy design in the last lecture, so I'm just going to show you how I then refined that just now to basically give you a better idea of what I'm trying to build. So here is the two levels separated out. This is the top level here on the right. You can see there's a courtyard section with some doors. We've got the 4 cells here with pillars, table and chair, this time labelled. We've got the statuette hidden inside this open cell, and the secret door here that the statuette opens, and then stairs going down to the lower crypt level. Here in the lower crypt, we've now got a dead end over here, some door, but it's closed, we can't get in. We've got the vase, which we're going to need later to open up our closing rails. It's hidden over here. And then, if you go around the corner in this crypt, you're going to find the open doors to the mausoleum, where there is the statue that we want to steal. We take that statue, the rails close, so we need to put the statue back. We need to then go find some substitute for the statue, this vase over here near the dead end, and then we can escape with our statue. So that's going to be the little puzzle. We're going to have to, first of all, find that we need to open the secret door. Then we're going to need to find the vase to open the statue. Well, how do we go about creating this with the components we've got? Well, control space to open up our content drawer, and then we can search for floor. So if I search for floor, you can see it's coming up with a bunch of different stuff, but what we're looking for is the SM floor. So maybe we can start with SM floor, and you can see it's going to come up with a few options. We've got the crypt floor, but we've also got our standard floor as well. So we need to decide where we want to start with our design. In my case, I think I'm going to start with the upper section and the courtyard, etc. So let's go ahead and start creating the courtyard. As you can see from my design, this looks like it needs to be 3 units by 3 units for this main inner section, and the outer section may as well be 3 by 2. So let's go in and create that. We're going to take a floor mesh and we're going to drag it into our top-down scene like so, and you can see that it's added it in here. So we can then, you can see you can drag it around pretty freely, but I actually don't want to drag it around so freely. We can restrict how we're dragging it by clicking on this plus icon here, or if you've got a bigger screen, it's actually going to be visible to you. And we're going to look at the grid snap settings. Now here we get to choose the increments with which this is going to snap. And in this case, I actually want to snap with fairly large increments of 1 meter, which will allow me to place things aligned on this grid that we are seeing. Now I'm just going to reset the transform so that this floor starts at the 0, 0 point, and we can start building out the floor for our courtyard. So now I'm just going to reset to snap with fairly large increments of 1 meter, which will allow me to place things aligned on this grid that we are seeing. And in this case, I actually want to snap with fairly large increments of 1 meter, which will allow me to place things aligned on this grid that we are seeing. Now I'm just going to reset the transform so that this floor starts at the 0, 0 point, and we can start building out the floor for our courtyard. So we can alt-click and drag in the top-down view to start creating the courtyard. Now I want my X to be the forward direction, and in the X direction is where we're going to head to get to our goals. So I'm going to build out the courtyard around that. We're just going to drag these floor tiles a bit, and that should create us the courtyard. Now remember, we're doing this in the unlit mode because we have no lighting at the moment. Now, just at the moment, just be following along, and in a second I'm going to challenge you to build out your own level. So just watch, see how I build with the level, and then we'll come back and do some more level building after that. Now, I just want to take a second to have a look at the outliner and check that we are going to have something manageable here in the outliner. You can see that we're already starting to accumulate a lot of actors, and they're kind of unmanaged. So what I would like to do is right-click on this and move them into a new folder, which we're going to call the courtyard, so that we can just have the different areas split out, and we can easily hide or show different elements of the map. This is going to be useful when we have a lot more map. Now, before I go much further, I'd like to add some walls into my courtyard. So I'm going to look for SM wall in the outliner. And you can see we've got the crypt walls first of all, but I want the dungeon walls here. And you can see there's a few variations of decorative wall available too. I'm just going to go for the standard dungeon wall, and I'm going to try and place it somewhere in my level. You can see I can actually put it in the visible level, or I could try and drop it into one of the other levels instead, but I'm just going to put it in the visible section, and then I'm going to try and align its corner with the edge of the map and then drag it out to make a wall. When we get to a corner, we need to rotate it by 90 degrees, about like so. And you can see that we've got the wall finished off over here. Now, what I can do is I can easily take these two elements by shift-clicking them, in fact, and then I can move them to the other side with an Alt drag to the other side, and that finishes off the wall nicely on the whole courtyard. Well, actually not quite. We need to bring two panels here over to add wall on this side of the courtyard, because we're going to have a big door in this central area. But we'll think about the door in just a second. First of all, we're going to continue our flooring. So now that I have these three panels, I can select them with shift-click and then Alt and duplicate the whole lot so that I can create floor for the whole of the inside dungeon area. And I can do the same with the walls. So here we go. We've got our main dungeon area in there. We've got our walls, we've got our little courtyard area, which we may want to make bigger later on, which we can always do. And then we've got our secret door going down the stairs into the crypt.
Ah no, look at this. Alô, alô. Ué. Teste, teste. Watch aqui no microfone, eu não tinha percebido, desculpa. Falei hello, tudo good. Eu tava falando aqui sobre o drag and drop, né? Agora tem um drag and drop pros itens. Pra equipar e desequipar. Mas que eu fiz aqui. Nossa, fiz tanta coisa. Eu fiz. Você viu o novo loading? Olha que legal. Eu tô tão orgulhoso desse novo loading, eu vou mostrar de novo. Ó, agora. Aí, ó. Esse preparing for launch. Aí aqui embaixo aparece um textinho. Mais que eu fiz aqui. Algumas coisas. Peraí, deixa eu ver aqui na minha lista. Ah, é! Se liga. Aqui agora no Blender, tá vendo que você tem Speed, Critical. Então agora, quando você faz um craft de alguma coisa, você ganha pontos pra colocar ou em Critical ou em Speed. E aí quando você coloca os pontos, aumenta a velocidade ou tem chance de craftar mais de um, né? Então deixa eu resetar aqui. Né? No caso não, 0. Então, tá vendo? Eu tô com 0, 0, né? Aí eu posso vir aqui e falar assim, eu quero craftar isso. Eu preciso de 50 de XP. Cada um dá 15, então a gente precisa de 4, né? Vamos craftar esses caras. Lógico que isso é só... o visual é temporário, né? Isso tudo eu vou mudar depois. Tô preocupado com os sistemas primeiro, porque esse jogo precisa ter os sistemas bem certinho pra ficar legal. Onde tá o negócio? Aí agora eu cheguei no level 2, tá vendo? Aí no level 2... mais ou menos. Enfim, isso não vem ao caso agora, mas... Tá vendo? Agora eu ganhei um ponto que eu posso... Tá vendo? Eu tenho um skill point, aí eu posso escolher. Eu quero pôr em crítico ou em speed. Aí eu ponho em speed ou em crítico, aí você ganha um percentualzinho do crítico. Isso. Agora tem o body armor, tá vendo? Acho que você não viu também. O que mais? Deixa eu ver aqui. Arrumei os tooltip que tava tudo cagado, né? E agora o tooltip aqui também funciona. Então agora tá bonitinho, não dá mais problema de ficar fixo pra sempre. Eu arrumei os status aqui que não estavam sendo aplicados, né? Quando você... Se você olhar aqui, ó, defesa, por exemplo, 19, agora foi para 24 com o seu shield, tá vendo? Aí agora a gente tá aplicando isso certinho, que antes não tava. Agora nós temos um vendor. Então a gente pode comprar outros itens aqui no vendor. Você fala, eu quero comprar um item, uma espadinha. Você comprou a espadinha por 50 de gold. Aqui tem quanto gold você tem. Agora a gente tem mais uma espadinha. Aí eu cliquei no item, quero vender. Eu quero vender as maçãs. Quanto de gold custa? Bem da hora. Então o sisteminha de compra e venda já tá pronto também. Arrumei alguns bugs de mover os itens pra lá e pra cá. melhorei esse carinha aqui, né? Agora eu consigo. Isso aqui é só pra mim, né? Enquanto eu tô desenvolvendo. Aí eu posso subir nível, diminuir nível das coisas e tal. Então agora eu posso esconder pra não ficar me atrapalhando. É isso. Aí eu já tô preparado pra fazer a parte de quest, que vai ter umas questzinhas. Tô preparado pra fazer a parte online. E aí depois disso eu vou começar a passar dar um talento no visual, implementar algumas coisas, fazer um levelzinho, sabe, bem bonitinho mesmo, tentar fazer, né, o level bem bonitinho, tentar fazer a primeira cidade assim um pouquinho mais legal, com uns NPC de verdade e tal, né, do jeito que eu gostaria. Depois que eu fizer isso, aí eu vou e tiver com o modo online, aí eu vou liberar pra vocês entrarem e verem e darem opinião também, né? Porque é diferente ver e participar, né? E ter na mão, né? Você assistir é uma coisa, mas você mesmo jogar é outra, né? Então, ainda tem outras coisas pra fazer, né? Tipo o filtro lá do inventário, essas coisas, né? Que eu quero colocar e tal, mas é coisa que não preciso pro jogo funcionar, né? O que eu quero é ter o. Tipo, eu quero que a pessoa. Que você possa craftar coisas, que tenha level no crafting, né? Que esse level vá sendo alterado quanto que você precisa de XP e tudo mais. O que eu quero é poder dar crítico nos bichos. E aí aparecer, né? O crítico quando dá o crítico e tal. Quero poder fazer esse tipo de coisa, né? A gente. Aí, tá vendo o crítico ali que apareceu? 50 lá. Esse tipo de coisa, né? Esses detalhes é o que eu quero fazer para o jogo ficar legal, né? E ver os números crescendo conforme você vai tendo mais dano e tal. E, nem lembro se eu mostrei isso aqui, ó. Tá vendo? Pro setor 2. Pra você chegar no setor 2, você precisa ter matado um determinado número de ratos no setor 1, sabe? Isso aqui fica fechado antes e tal. Então agora ele ficou aberto. Não é que eu desabilitei porque eu não fiz o setor 2, né? Não vai ter o setor. Mas basicamente é isso, né? Matar os bichos, ganhar os loot. Provavelmente eu vou fazer uns 3, 4 bichos diferentes em um level só. Pra gente testar as coisas diferentes que quer testar. Quero testar, tipo, todo mundo entrando junto no jogo ao mesmo tempo para ver como que fica, né? Coisa, ver se as pessoas conseguem quebrar o jogo de alguma forma para eu poder arrumar já os bugs. Tipo de coisa, né? Cordinha tá funcionando. Vendor tá funcionando. Tá tudo meio que funcionando agora, tá legal. Vai ficando legal. Coloquei esse negócio, agora você pode trocar, né, um item com outro de lugar. E aí ele fica verdinho nas costas. Esse aqui é o Body Armor, né? Só um exemplo, né, obviamente. Ah, é porque está Este defensive. Só preciso arrumar o item. É isso, eu tô estudando ainda, né? Status. Shield 2. Ah, agora sim. Ok, eu achei que tava com algum bug, mas eu só tava com status configurado errado. Defense. Isso. Body Armor dá dano. Eu nem tenho dano aqui, né? Fazer com dano. Dano genérico. Ah, isso aqui agora funciona também, o botão de voltar, porque antes não estava funcionando. As coisas para resolver, mas... Tá para os estudos.
So the stairs are probably the next element that I want to worry about. So let's search for SM stair. And you can see they come in two varieties, 5 steps and 10 steps. Now, having looked at the level, I know that you need 1 5-step and 2 10 steps to make it down to the crypt level. But if we weren't sure about that, how could we figure that out? Well, first of all, we could have a look for some crypt wall and figure out from there essentially what the height is. So I'm going to bring in a crypt wall. I'm going to drag it in to my level down here, and I'm going to try and align it on the right-hand view so that we can kind of see its height. Now you see this height, because it's 450, doesn't align with our grid spacing. So we need to go and change the grid snap settings to be a grid size of 50. So now we're going to align on 0.5 meter. And that allows me just to align the roof of this floor level with the bottom of the floor on the upper level. So you can see what that looks like from this view, and it kind of looks okay. I'm just going to make sure it's aligned with the side of the passage, but we may need to change things there anyway. Now, let's take the stair. So SM stair is what we're going to look for. And I'm going to take the 10 unit stair. And notice it's aligned in the wrong direction. It's trying to go up in the y-axis, so we're going to need to rotate it by 90 degrees. And then we can try and position this so that it starts at the exit to our dungeon. And then we can duplicate it. I'm going to use the right view and Alt to move these steps down. And you can see how another set of 10 stairs would be too many here. So we can take the slightly smaller mesh, bring it into our scene, and we can rotate that by 90 degrees as well, and then try and position it next to these stairs here. Now, it's not 100% perfect, and we may need to have the floor level slightly higher than the last few steps, but that's going to be fine too. We can easily just have the wall start here and also have some crypt floor starting down there as well. So let's search for the SM crypt floor. And you can see there's a few concave examples, but I want the flat crypt floor, which I'm going to drag in to our top-down view. And notice that the stairs are actually a bit wider than that floor, but that's fine. What we can do to mitigate that fact here is simply just have 2 of them and hide some of the flooring behind the wall. So we select both of these, bring them down to our floor level under the stairs, and we may just need to bring them along to align them with our wall. Now I'm going to finish off the walls in our staircase by duplicating some of the dungeon walls here, bringing them into the staircase like so. and then just filling out with some copies this whole space. And it doesn't matter if things overlap a little bit and we have extra wall that's not visible, that's all part of.
Oh shit.
Well, so let's search for the SM crypt floor. You can see there's a few concave examples, but I want the flat crypt floor, which I'm going to drag in to our top-down view. And notice that the stairs are actually a bit wider than that floor, but that's fine. What we can do to mitigate that fact here is simply just have two of them and hide some of the flooring behind the wall. So we select both of these, bring them down to our floor level under the stairs, and we may just need to bring them along to align them with our wall. Now I'm going to finish off the walls in our staircase by duplicating some of the dungeon walls here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Here, bringing them into the staircase like so, and then just filling out with some copies this whole space. And it doesn't matter if things overlap a little bit and we have extra wall that's not visible, that's all part of the magic of using these modular things, is you can often just hide the fact that you've got a little bit of excess behind some of your other scenery. So here you can see I've got the staircase mostly sorted. I'm going to add in a bit of wall here to patch things up over the top of our crypt hallway. Going to rotate it 90 degrees. Then I'm going to select and shift select all the walls along this one side. I notice I've actually got a duplicate wall that's misaligned that I don't need. So let's get rid of that, and then shift click all of this using the move tool, alt click, and move it to the other side of the staircase. And if we go and have a look from a player perspective, you can see things are not quite aligned here on the corner. But this is okay because we can patch this over with some pillars or some other level design material later on. We're just getting the basic building blocks right now, and this is looking pretty okay, to be honest. So with some of these skills, I'd like you to go ahead and have a stab at creating your own level layout. First of all, just look at doing the walls and floors and ceilings potentially as well if you want, or if you want to see how I do those, you can come back and try that with me later on. We're also going to add in some doors, try and find some door meshes and add doors between some of your areas, and then decoration after that. So adding in pillars and arches and stuff. Have a go, see if you can decorate some of the set scene as well. But for now, just ignore any lighting. We're going to stay in this unlit mode and just look at our geometry for the level instead. Okay, welcome back. So let's carry on. I think ceilings are needed within this crypt at the moment because it's quite open air. So we're going to have a look for the SM ceiling. And we've got a few different ceiling pieces here of different arch length. I think I just want this simple ceiling here, which I'm going to drag in to the top-down view. And I'm going to try and position. Now, it's pretty invisible from the top, which is slightly annoying. But as long as I know which corner we are aligning, or whether we're aligning a corner, no, it looks like the center of the mesh is actually the center of it. So we're not aligning a corner at all. We're trying to place it in the middle, and we're trying to have it lifted up. We can use that either the right or the back view to do that. Lift it up so that it meets with, let's see, we don't actually want it to go over our walls. We want it to overlap them so that when we're inside, there you go, you can see completely blocked off by the wall and the ceiling like so. So now all that we need to do is repeat this to cover the entirety of the dungeon using a bit of shift clicking magic once we've got a few of them. And there we go. We've got a ceiling that basically covers the entirety of our dungeon.
Ceiling. Ceiling is using.
And we've got a few different ceiling pieces here of different arch length. I think I just want this simple ceiling here, which I'm going to drag in to the top-down view. And I'm going to try and position. Now, it's pretty invisible from the top, which is slightly annoying. But as long as I know which corner we are aligning, or whether we're aligning a corner, no, it looks like the center of the mesh is actually the center of it. So we're not aligning a corner at all. We're trying to place it in the middle, and we're trying to have it lifted up. We can use that either the right or the back view to do that. Lift it up so that it meets with, let's see, we don't actually want it to go over our walls. We want it to overlap them so that when we're inside, there you go, you can see completely blocked off by the wall and the ceiling like so. So now all that we need to do is repeat this to cover the entirety of the dungeon using a bit of
I'm doing perspective view. Under.
shift-clicking magic once we've got a few of them. And there we go. We've got a ceiling that basically covers the entirety of our dungeon. We just need to extend that ceiling a little bit further to cover our staircase. So there we've got the staircase covered as well. Now I'm going to try and look for some doors that I want. So I'm going to look for SM door. And you can see we've got these doorways with doors separate. Actually, I think we want a BP door, so a blueprint door, that has both of them already put together into a blueprint. So we've got the crypt doorway, we've got the dungeon doorway. We want a dungeon doorway in our upper level. So let's go and put that in the level and arrange it so that actually the doorway should be at the other end, not near my secret passage. So there we go, we've got a doorway over here. Now I want to set the doors slightly ajar, so if I select the blueprint, I can then go down and have a look at the individual components that make it up with a left door and a right door, and I can select the rotation and the transform of the Z-axis to rotate these doors a little bit open, both of them, so that they both swing open in the same direction. Like so, we've got a doorway out to the courtyard. Now let's look for SM pillar, and I want the SM pillar, not the crypt pillar. I'm going to
minutes.
drag this into our scene, and I'm going to position it in the middle of these posts. There we go, like so. Now I think to break up the monotony of these walls, we're going to need some arches. So if we search for SM arch, then we've got ceiling arch A's and B's. Just going to go with the A's for now. We can always easily swap out a mesh if we need to. So I've positioned this arch. It should be going over the entry to the secret passage, and then I can lift it up so that it's properly aligned with the ceiling. Let's duplicate out these arches so that they cover this entire wall. And I'm going to shift select them all and duplicate them along the room. So that does the arches in one orientation. Let's rotate them by 90 degrees with an alt click to make a duplicate at the same time. And let's duplicate them in the other orientation. There we go, that's broken up the monotony of that room quite significantly. We may want
Okay, looks kind of cool, right? So cool.
to have some of those arches in the staircase as well. So I selected a group of arches that I've already got, and I'll alt-drag them to fill the staircase. That's looking a lot better, and I'm just noticing that I think I probably need pillars in every one of these spots as well. In the case of the staircase, I think I need 2 pillars, one on top of the other. And there you go, I've got...
Well, okay, yeah. Yeah. looks kind of good. Arches on this. Oh. Yo, my friend. Looks good.
Got pillars now on each of these arches, which makes the room really filled out and look good. And we've almost got all the pillars that we want here in the staircase. I'm just going to need to duplicate these sets of 4 pillars to go a little bit further. To finish this off, I'm just going to need to add in some cell walls. So we've actually got, I noticed it before, we have a BP cell here, which has got a door. So I'm going to bring that in for the cell doors. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and position it between the pillars. Duplicate that around. And then we're going to need just the cell side, which is SM cell. I'm going to position that correctly and duplicate it around. There we go. We've got cell walls, we've got cells, and we've got a bit of a dungeon setup going on. Now the next bit
Hey. Here and here and there and there and here and there. cool. I like it. I like it. Enough.
Crypt downstairs is basically more of the same but with different meshes. I'm just going to go ahead and speed through that while I create it. So one thing I've noticed here with the ceiling is that because we've got a slightly wider section where it interfaces with the units of the dungeon, we actually need to use this half ceiling to bridge the gap, and we'll have to use a bit of flat ceiling too. So I'm just going to duplicate this, going to rotate it 180 degrees, and you can see we've got a bit of a hole here. So we're going to use this SM Crypt Ceiling Flat to patch that.
Oh shit, these controls are amazing. It's a little. Perfect. Okay.
Over, and that covers it over rather nicely. And we'll just duplicate that whole assembly into the corridor. And now we can just use the standard crypt ceilings here. And you can see they dovetail nicely into that little patched bit of ceiling that we've created. Now I'm getting to the bit where I'm going to be using the mausoleum meshes. So the mausoleum is a funny looking double mesh here. Well, two sides to it, and there's a ceiling as well, especially for it. So let's take in the mausoleum and plonk it in our scene to see what it looks like. Let's put it at the right height.
Eu vi algumas coisas assim. Anunciar amanhã, né?
Wall that's rounded, so we do still need a capping wall at the end here. And what we can do is we can either rotate or scale it to the other side. So I can just go ahead and kind of invert the scale for the mausoleum to get a mirror image on the other side. And I just need to do the same old thing with the ceiling too. Just position it down at the right level, and you can see that the ceiling fits on perfectly to this mesh underneath it. Duplicate it and scale it by -1, and now minus a floor and something on the end wall over there, we've got ourselves a nice looking little mausoleum here. Now with any of these really boring walls, we can actually swap them out for other static mesh walls. So if you go to the details pane and scroll down to where you've got the static mesh, then what we can do is we can just go in here and search for SM Crypt Wall, and you can see there's a few decorative options, so you can select the
Ah. Ah, é dia 5, tem razão. Oh, wow. Why it's looking. Good. Enough. Oh, fuck is it exactly the same? Be right back.
decorative A, for example, instead. In this case, it's rotated. This wall is rotated the wrong way, so I'm just going to have to rotate it by 180 and put it into place. And you can see that you get a more decorative wall that's in keeping with the rest of this mausoleum
Which
area.
wall
So I'm
is
just adding
that?
some arches and pillars.
Wait. Fucker. You got another one. Oh, this one. Eh. Doors. Not door. Arch. Oh, there are so many more. Oh. Exactly the same. Eu vi a corrida que teve ontem também.
Just a little bit by scaling it, which is not ideal, but it'll do.
No POI 2, né?
So let's do a quick fly through to see if there's anything obviously missing. So here I am in my courtyard, and we're going to fly into the dungeon, and you can see that that looks pretty good. Everything seems to be matching up. No kind of open gaps between things. Now I can go down my staircase, and let's just check. The staircase looks okay as well. Yep, that looks good. Now we're going to go down. I've put a little arch and a hallway, little door here. We may need to put something across the top.
Foi interessantezinho de
If we
ver.
look for SM trim, then there seems to be something that may fit at the bill. It doesn't quite align with the axis, so what I'm going to do is just quickly switch off our grid snapping so that I can put it in place like so. And I'm also going to move the arch ever so slightly so that it's not penetrating this wall, because I don't want to see it on this
Café
side. I just
chegou,
want to see it on the other side like so. And now I'm actually looking at these bits of wall between the pillars, and they don't look quite right. So I think what we need here is this SM edge stones, which if I drag them into the scene, you can see just look like this. They kind of neaten up that edge there. Now, I've had the grid snapping off when I brought this in, so let's go back to switch on the grid snapping. Then we can right-click on the object and go to snapping, and then snap origin to grid, which then puts it back onto the grid and allows us to move it around and put it between these edging pillars here. Having duplicated that to both sides, I think that just makes this staircase look a little bit better. Let's continue our fly through. So we can see here's our dead end over here. Everything's looking okay. What if we go in the other direction? Well, I think we need something on this wall here, so I'm just going to swap that out. So I'm just going for a decorative B and rotating it round, like so. Looks a little bit less monotonous. Let's continue the fly through. Down we go down this corridor and in to our mausoleum, which is looking quite all right, apart from this arch poking through. So let's push the arch back just a little bit. In fact, we can, without switching grid snapping off, we could just adjust things minutely in the details pane just by shifting the x-axis, coming through and having a look and seeing that that looks okay here. Noticing that I've actually got a couple of pillars missing here as well. We could just use a bit of edge trim stone here instead. Just changing the grid snapping scale to place these stones, as they don't really fit onto our modular system in this particular location, but they do the job of rounding things off quite nicely. So great stuff. One thing before we finish off, we've got 200 and almost 60 actors in our scene, and I forgot to put them into folders. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that now. And one way that's quite easy to do this by sections is to box select, which you can just do by left clicking and dragging on any of the orthographic views. You can see that allows us to select objects quite easily. We might just want to deselect a couple of things manually. So these selected actors, I'm going to right click, move to a new folder called the dungeon. So now we've got the courtyard, the dungeon. We can hide both of these so that we can see what actors we actually selected. I can see that the walls here haven't been selected, so I can Control Alt click in the 3D viewport. I can also box select those actors, and I can right click, move them to the courtyard, so that now when I go to the courtyard folder and make it invisible, that goes as well. The next thing I want to do is the staircase. So I'm box selecting that from the right view, just going into the 3D view and visually inspecting that everything I wanted has been selected. Right clicking that, move to create new folder, and we'll call this one the staircase. Let's hide it, make sure we got all the actors that we wanted. Looks like we did. Now I'm going to box select this whole corridor section. Again, visually inspecting for any actors that may have got missed. Right-clicking, move to, create new folder, corridor. Then we can hide the corridor. And now the last bit that's left, which is pretty easy to do, is going to be our mausoleum. So let's right-click and create a new folder and call it the mausoleum, which I always struggle to spell, but I think I managed by copying how it was spelt in the assets. So now if we close down all of our folders, we should hopefully not have any straggling leftovers that are not in any of these areas. And we can individually just enable the courtyard, for example, and just see that in our 3D view. We might just enable the dungeon or the mausoleum. We can just see individual elements one at a time if we need to, and that can be helpful when we get to having lots of actors like this. And you might want to split out your level in a different way.
Achei quinta, voltei outra noite e foi pra onde?
Folders within folders as well, so that you could disable the ceilings while you're trying to do work on just the floors. It depends on your own personal workflow, and you'll get a feel for that as you go along. But it's good to keep some sort of order there in the outliner. Okay, so that has been a mammoth long lecture. Well done for sticking through it. There's a lot of clicking and dragging to be done with level layout, but hopefully you've now got a feel for how to do this modular level layout, and you feel empowered to create your own levels. I'll see you in the next lecture.
Ah, Monte Verde é POG, hein, mano. No.
Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we're going to be setting up some lighting in our scene. We're going to add some sunlight and a sky, and we're going to also look at the 5 different types of lighting available to us in Unreal. Let's dive in and learn all about it. So if we were to switch from our currently unlit mode into the lit mode, you'll see that
tô falando que é POG porque nunca fui.
Dark. And the reason for this is that we've got no lights in our scene, nothing by which to illuminate everything around us. So let's go ahead and create a new folder in the outliner, which we're going to call global, and this is going to be for stuff.
Ignorância, sim, já foi.
And then we're going to go to the quickly add to project and open up our place actor panel. And in here, we're going to go to the lights tab and have a look at the 5 different types of light that we can put into our scene. Perhaps the simplest to think of is the point light. If I drag this into our scene, you can see immediately the kind of effect that it has. Light emanates from a single point outwards, and that's pretty much it. We can change how powerful that light is, we can change how it trails off, we can change the color of the light. But the fundamental property of that light is that it is a source light.
Gostoso, né?
So let's remove that light now, and let's try a spotlight instead. So a spotlight, as the name suggests, has some sort of directionality to it, but it still emanates from a point. Now, I think these are very much like your standard kind of halogen lights, your spotlights in your house. And obviously they can be very useful for trying to illuminate a specific area or a specific object. All these lights can be rotated, so obviously with a point light, rotation didn't make much sense. But with a spotlight, rotating allows us to illuminate different areas. So that's the spotlight. Notable mention just to the rectangle area light. Rather than being a point source here, you can see that the light's actually emanating from the entirety of this rectangle. So you can see if I point it down, it's just a wider area for it to come from. And obviously this would work well with office lighting or anything where you want to illuminate from a larger area rather than from a particular point. And then 2 interesting ones here that are more natural are the directional light and the skylight. You can see the icon for directional light looks like the sun. And that's because the most common use of it is, in fact, as a sunlight. So if I stick this in the scene, you'll notice that it doesn't actually matter where I place this actor. I could place it anywhere, and the light doesn't change. The only thing that's important here is the rotation of the light.
Durante
If I
de
change
5
the
horas,
rotation, you can see
sim.
it changes the angle.
Ah,
of
mas é
these
legal,
rays
né? Vai falar que você não curtiu.
And that's because the sun is so
falar
infinitely
de
far
moto
away
já.
from us that essentially the light that reaches our scene is all parallel, is all going in a
Fui lá
single
no-
direction, and that's why it's called a directional
Um
light.
restaurante
It
lá
doesn't
alemão
matter, it's so
chamado
infinitely
Fritz.
far away that it shouldn't make a difference. And then the other thing, so if I delete this one out and we put our
Bem
skylight
POG.
into the scene, this is another one where the direction doesn't matter, but this time it's because the light is coming from all directions. And at the moment, it's actually not showing us anything very much at all. And if we go and have a look at the description of what a skylight does, you'll see that the light actually captures the distant light in our level and applies it to the scene as light. So typically the way we deal with this is by bringing in a massive sphere that goes around our entire level and simulates the really far off sky and distant horizon. Now, a place that we can go and find this is if we open up our content drawer, go to the settings button in it and select show engine content. And then you see an engine folder pops up. Let's click on that. And inside that folder, we're going to search for Sky. Now, what we want is this BP Sky Sphere. We can go and drag this into our level. And you can see if you pop out of the level that we've now got a sphere here that is absolutely massive and basically simulates the far off distant sky and the clouds and the sun in the sky. So that is what our skylight is trying to capture, the light for that. So we need to click on the skylight and we need to go scroll down to a property called Recapture Scene, and we click on Recapture. And you can see that the light now gets updated to represent that kind of soft twilight that is illuminating everything a little bit evenly. And that's what we wanted. And you can see inside it's still quite dark. With time, it's because the light is coming from all directions. And at the moment, it's actually not showing us anything very much at all. And if we go and have a look at the description of what a skylight does, you'll see that the light actually captures the distant light in our level and applies it to the scene as light. So typically the way we deal with this is by bringing in a massive sphere that goes around our entire level and simulates the really far off sky and distant horizon. Now, a place that we can go and find this is if we open up our content drawer, go to the settings button in it and select show engine content. And then you see an engine folder pops up. Let's click on that. And inside, folder we're going to search for Sky. Now, what we want is this BP Sky Sphere. We can go and drag this into our level. And you can see if you pop out of the level that we've now got a sphere here that is absolutely massive and basically simulates the far off distant sky and clouds and the sun in the sky. So that is what our skylight is trying to capture, the light for that. So we need to click on the skylight and we need to go scroll down to a property called Recapture Scene, and we click on Recapture. And you can see that the light now gets updated to represent that kind of soft twilight that is illuminating everything a little bit evenly. And that's what we wanted. And you can see inside it's still quite dark. We've only got a little bit of light spilling in from the outside, but it's given us a nice soft ambient light. And that's what we wanted. And you can see inside it's
Skylight. Comendo uma bolacha de maisena com café. Bolacha de maisena. Por quê?
still quite dark. We've only got a little bit of light spilling in from the outside, but it's given us a nice soft ambient light. So typically what happens is that we will put the skylight and the sky sphere together and also have a directional light on top of this as well. And we can set the direction of that light as we see fit by just kind of rotating it around like this. And if we then go back and select our sky sphere blueprint and look at the details pane for it, you can see that there is a link that it could want to a directional light actor. So we can select this asset by selecting the actor in our scene to pick that directional light, and you can see that instantly what it has done is it's changed to a much brighter daytime and the sun is high up in the sky. And that's because by linking those two in together, what we've said is that the sky sphere should match the angle of this directional light. So if I put the angle of the light really low, the sun hasn't quite updated because we'd need to go in to our BP Sky Actor and hit refresh material, which then redraws it, and you can see the sun is now low in the sky and the color of the sky has been automatically updated. So these two things being linked together is a really good thing. It makes them physically much more accurate, and the sun in the sky. So that is what our skylight is trying to capture, the light for that. So we need to click on the skylight, and we need to go scroll down to a property called Recapture Scene, and we click on Recapture. And you can see that the light now gets updated to represent that kind of soft twilight that is illuminating everything a little bit evenly. And that's what we wanted. And you can see inside it's still quite dark. We've only got a little bit of light spilling in from the outside, but it's given us a nice soft ambient light. So typically what happens is that we will put the skylight and the sky sphere together and also have a directional light on top of this as well. And we can set the direction of that light as we see fit by just kind of rotating it around like this. And if we then go back and select our sky sphere blueprint and look at the details pane for it, you can see that there is a link that it could want to a directional light actor. So we can select this asset by selecting the actor in our scene to pick that directional light, and you can see that instantly what it has done is it's changed to a much brighter daytime and the sun is high up in the sky. And that's because by linking those two in together, what we've said is that the sky sphere should match the angle of this directional light. So if I put the angle of the light really low, the sun hasn't quite updated because we'd need to go in to our BP Sky Actor and hit refresh material, which then redraws it, and you can see the sun is now low in the sky and the color of the sky has been automatically updated. So these two things being linked together is a really good thing. It makes them physically much more accurate. So I'm just going to put it back to the sun being reasonably high up in the sky, and then we can go to our BP Sky Sphere and just refresh its material one more time. Now these actors haven't gone in the global folder yet.
Como é que é?
Light as we see fit by just kind of rotating it around like this. And if we then go back and select our sky sphere blueprint and look at the details pane for it, you can see that there is a link that it could want to a directional light actor. So we can select this
Yes,
asset
I did that.
by selecting the actor in our scene to pick that directional light, and you can see that instantly what it has done is it's changed to a much brighter daytime and the sun is high up in the sky. And that's because by linking those two in together, what we've said is that the sky sphere should match the angle of this directional light. So if I put the angle of the light really low, the sun hasn't quite updated because we'd need to go in to our BP Sky Actor and hit refresh material, which then redraws it, and you can see the sun is now low in the sky and the color of the sky has been automatically updated. So these two things being linked together is a really good thing. It makes them physically much more accurate. So I'm just going to put it back to the sun being reasonably high up in the sky, and then we can go to our BP Sky Sphere and just refresh its material one more time. Now these actors haven't gone in the global folder yet, so let's go drag them in there, and these are all the things that apply at a global level, so it just allows us to tuck them away nice and neatly. So I'd like to challenge you to add some sunlight to your own.
Something's off here. For me, entering the whole scene.
Scene, so you're going to add a sky sphere, add a direction light and a skylight, and link them together as I've just done, so that when you move the direction light, it can update the material for the sky sphere, and the skylight then can recapture the light from that sky sphere and change the rotation of the sun. Maybe you want a different mood to your game. Mine's more high in the sky, but you might want a lower sun to represent a later time in the day. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So, well, this is how I've got it at the moment. The only thing I want to check is the skylight looks quite orange, so I'm guessing we haven't recaptured the skylight. So I'm going to the skylight and then scrolling on down to where it says recapture. If I hit recapture now, you can see the skylight has gone far more blue in the shadows, and that's because the reflected atmospheric light in our sky sphere is more blue because of the sun being higher and the rays not getting scattered and all that kind of physical goodness. Now you may notice that some of the shadows here are looking rather strange. Don't worry about this just yet, we are going to fix this in a later lecture. So that's it for this lecture. We've looked over the different types of light that we can have in.
Oh, if I do need the skylight, this. Oh. Something's off.
our scene, and the most complex setup being how we do sunlight from the outside, but it's given us a nice soft ambient light. So typically what happens is that we will put the skylight and the sky sphere together and also have a directional
lights. Let me do some. Cells. LiDAR. ceiling was the issue. I have something here. This with probably have to put some blocking thing here also. Quer que eu faça um chá pra você? Ó? Quer que eu te faça um chá? The mausoleum. Fuck this small fucking. Here. Where's the... Maybe these lights I have to do something. Let's look away. Oh, this is cool. Guys.
That we will put the skylight and the sky sphere together and also have a directional light on top of this as well. And we can set the direction of that light as we see fit by just kind of rotating it around like this. And if we then go back and select our sky sphere blueprint and look at the details pane for it, you can see that there is a link that it could want to a directional light actor. So we can select this asset by selecting the actor in our scene to pick that directional light. And you can see that instantly what it has done is it's changed to a much brighter daytime and the sun is high up in the sky. And that's because by linking those two in together, what we've said is that the sky sphere should match the angle of this directional light. So if I put the angle of the light really low, the sun hasn't quite updated because we'd need to go in to our BP sky actor and hit refresh material, which then redraws it, and you can see the sun is now low in the sky and the color of the sky has been automatically updated. So these two things being linked together is a really good thing. It makes them physically much more accurate. So I'm just going to put it back to the sun being reasonably high up in the sky, and then we can go to our BP Sky Sphere and just refresh its material one more time. Now these actors haven't gone in the global folder yet, so let's go drag them in there. And these are all the things that apply at a global level, so it just allows us to tuck them away nice and neatly. So I'd like to challenge you to add some sunlight to your own scene. So you're going to add a sky sphere, add a direction light and a skylight, and link them together as I've just done, so that when you move the direction light, it can update the material for the sky sphere, and the skylight then can recapture the light from that sky sphere and change the rotation of the sun. Maybe you want a different mood to your game. Mine's more high in the sky, but you might want a lower sun to represent a later time in the day. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So, well, this is how I've got it at the moment. The only thing I want to check is the skylight looks quite orange, so I'm guessing we haven't recaptured the skylight. So I'm going to the skylight and then scrolling on down to where it says recapture. If I hit recapture now, you can see the skylight has gone far more blue in the shadows, and that's because the reflected atmospheric light in our sky sphere is more blue because of the sun being higher and the rays not getting scattered and all that kind of physical goodness. Now you may notice that some of the shadows here are looking rather strange. Don't worry about this just yet, we are going to fix this in a later lecture. So that's it for this lecture. We've looked over the different types of light that we can have in our scene, and the most complex setup being how we do sunlight. I'll see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome. In this lecture we're going to be making the inside of our dungeon completely pitch black by adding some panels around the outside to essentially block out any light from bleeding into the dungeon. This is a preparatory step for the next one.
I just did that.
Light
I didn't know.
So let's dive in and see
I
how
was
it's
going to learn this.
So when we were playing around with lighting in the last level, you may have seen that we instantly got some updates to the lighting, and if we brought in objects we could instantly see the effects of those lights, and there's lots of scattered and soft bounce lighting. And this is due to a new development in Unreal 5 called Lumen. It's a real-time global illumination light engine. And because it's fairly new, there are still some features that are not supported in Lumen, and you can see this going on with this material on the wall. You can see how it's kind of got this weird shadowing effect. Well, this is because there are some features being used in its material that are not supported yet by Lumen. So what we need to do is we need to edit this material, and we can find the material for this particular segment like so. Click on the wall, let's go down to the area where it says materials, and under the materials you can see we've got this stone wall inst. If we select that in the content browser and we scroll down to the stone wall, what it means by inst, what does it mean by having that underscore inst at the end? Basically what it's saying is this is not actually the material itself. It doesn't tell it how to render the material. It's just
there's an instance of the
blueprint of the material that tells it which textures to use and other settings. So what we need to do is right click on it and click find parent. And if we click find parent, then open the content drawer again, you can see we've got this M tiling master. Hovering over that does show us that this is indeed a material. This is the master material that the other materials are made from. So we can click this to open it up, and we now get the material editor. It's very much like a blueprint editor. You can see there's all these nodes here, except we don't have an execution pin. These are all just data pins. It doesn't really matter as to how this works exactly. The important thing is that all the output data is going into this node at the end, and one of the things that isn't supported in Lumen is this pixel depth offset. We basically can't use that. So we need to disconnect it. And we can do that by alt-clicking on the pin. It can go away. Then we go to the toolbar and hit apply, and it's going to go ahead and recompile the material code, recompile the shaders, and have that available in our level. Now if we go over into the dungeon, you can see that weird shadow effect has gone away, and we've got a better looking level. So now it's time to start lighting the interior of our level. You can see there's a lot of light bleeding in to this interior of the level, and that is because actually our ceiling is a one-sided mesh, and so light's kind of coming through into the room. And we'd see this even more if we do the following. Because Lumen is a real-time system, it really works best when you use real-time lights. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we go to our global folder and select the directional light and have a look in the details pane, you can see that there is a mobility setting here. And this basically tells Unreal whether we intend to move or modify this object when the game is playing. So static means no, nothing is going to change about this object full stop, and that allows Unreal to bake in a lot of things like lighting settings before you play the game. There's stationary, which says you can't move it, but you can change things like the brightness. And then there's movable, which basically means anything could change. Now, funnily enough, Lumen, the new Unreal lighting system, works best when your lights are set to be movable. So if we switch our directional light to movable, you can instantly see the problem here that essentially the light is just coming straight through these ceiling panels, because from the light's point of view, they aren't there. They are one-sided, and so it doesn't actually create any shadow in here. And we can do the same thing, set the other light in our scene to movable, which is the skylight, and that's just going to compute all of our lights in real time, and it's much easier to deal with lighting when we're doing everything in real time using Lumen. So let's start having a look at how we can block out the light here. I think one of the easiest ways to light and set these ceiling panels, because from the light's point of view, they aren't there. They're one-sided, and so it doesn't actually create any shadow in here. And we can do the same thing, set the other light in our scene to movable, which is the skylight, and that's just going to compute all of our lights in real time, and it's much easier to deal with lighting when we're doing everything in real time using Lumen. So let's start having a look at how we can block out the light here. I think one of the easiest ways to do this is actually just to take the floor meshes and lift them up to be a roof over the top of our dungeon. That's certainly one way we can do it. So I'm going to go ahead and search the outline of the floor, and then look in the dungeon folder and just select the dungeon floor elements. Then I'm going to go to the 4-pane view, and I'm going to pull the floor up while alt-clicking to duplicate it and bring it up to a level where it can be our ceiling here. If we go inside, I just want to check that it is indeed blocking out the light effectively, and it seems like it is. If you bring it too close, then you can get some light bleeding in. So we don't want it too close, but we do want it just close enough, like so perhaps. So there we go. We've not got any light bleeding into this room except from these corners. And if you pop out, you can see why. The edges are not quite meeting the top here. So what we need to do there is put some of that edging meshes around there. So if we look for edge in our medieval dungeon, we've got the edge stones. Let's drag those in and place them next to these objects and duplicate it along, maybe changing the grid snap setting to be 1 meter. We'll duplicate and duplicate again, and we've got ourselves, hopefully, the light being blocked inside our dungeon. Yep, looks like it's being blocked quite effectively. And just for completeness sake, we're going to take these 3 edge stones, select them, and duplicate them over to the other side, like so,
What the
and then
fuck?
rotate them 90 degrees with a duplicate, and then duplicate it on over here as well. So you can see that inside now we've got a very, very dark dungeon. And if you wanted to check that we can indeed illuminate it at all, then we could just go to
it's
quickly add, go
computer.
to lights and drag in a point light to see the effect of illuminating the dungeon. So I'd like to challenge you to block out the light. So you've seen how I've been doing it, add floor and edge stones around the whole of your corridors. You may need to rotate them so that you can cover some of the rounded areas, for example, round that mausoleum. And you might also want to check that all your corridors are dark once you've finished and there's no light bleeding in from any places. You need to cover them all up, make it all dark. So pause the video and have a go, and remember that you can use the unlit mode to move around when things are dark. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So let's remove this light from our scene because we don't need it. We just want to see whether we're making everything nice and dark. So what I'm noticing here is we've got the edge stone here that we don't really need because the edge is actually over here at the end of the staircase. It's a bit of a funny shape. So let's go ahead and move that edge along. Then I'm going to copy a couple of edge stones from the already built section and duplicate them to the other side of this corridor. Then select a couple of floor panels and move those along too. Now switching into unlit mode, let's go and position ourselves so we can see the staircase, then switch back to lit, and you can see that the staircase is looking pretty dark in here. We just need to cover up the crypt area now, so we're going to select all of that crypt flooring. So I'm doing that by searching the outliner for crypt floor, and then selecting all of it. I think I just need to be careful to deselect these 2 bits of floor at the start of the staircase, and it looks like there's this crypt floor wall trim to deselect as well. Then when I'm confident it's all at the same level, I'm going to Alt and drag it up to make a duplicate. Looks like I may need to change the grid snapping to be 50 because of the height of the ceiling. I can bring it up 1 level more. Now if I switch to unlit mode, I can position myself inside the corridor to have a little look. Go to lit, and I can see that it's starting to look quite dark. These architraves have got a bit of light bleeding, so I think I just need to position them probably 10 centimeters higher altogether, so there's not any light bleeding from those architraves, and then any of the edge that doesn't quite match up here, we're going to have to put some edging stone around that. So let me just go and check. Aha, we've got a little bit of an issue here where light's being let in from the backside of this decorative wall and also from the backside of these mausoleum meshes. So let's try and fix that by duplicating some roof and maybe rotating it down to cover this piece that was bleeding light. And if we want to be safe and have some margin for error, we could actually copy 2 of them across here so that there is absolutely no way light's coming in there. And we probably want to do roughly about the same thing with our mausoleum. Duplicate some wall down here, rotate it about 90 degrees, and then I'm actually going to duplicate it to be higher as well. And the flooring does need to be higher up on the mausoleum to let the whole roof fit. And I think these walls need to be a smidge further out to not include some of this mesh. Looks like we've still got some light coming in from somewhere. So I'm just going to duplicate a couple more panels like so, and along the top 2. Switch to unlit, let's go inside the mausoleum and have a little look around. Back to lit, Okay, looks like it's just the edging stones to do now. Or actually, because this area is not going to be visible from the exterior, it doesn't matter how it looks, so we can just add some extra flooring like this and just make it extra wide. And then inside you can see that there's no bleeding going on. So we can do that same procedure with the rest of the corridor. Move some of it slightly across and then the rest over to the right. Switch to unlit, check I'm inside the corridor, and then back to lit, and everywhere apart from that door is looking completely pitch black. Is that true? Even when I'm looking up the staircase, I wonder. Let's have a look at the staircase. Hit lit. Yep, it's looking pretty dark in here. Very, very dark indeed. So there we go. We've effectively blocked out any light bleed that we were getting inside our dungeon, which will set the stage for lighting it properly in the next video. I'll see you there. Hello and welcome. In this lecture we're going to be lighting the interior of our scene with torches and chandeliers and looking at the different lighting settings available to us to tweak the light intensity and various shadow settings as well. Let's dive in and see how this is done. Before we go any further, I noticed that I've got all these edge stones that are currently not organised in the outliner, so I'm going to take these and drag them into the dungeon folder so they disappear with that dungeon. Okay, now that we've got that set up, it's time to start lighting the interior of our scene. Now, my weapon of choice here is going to be to use the BP torch. If you search for that, then there's this great blueprint that's set up already with some nice flaming torch effect and a light as well. My only problem with this torch is that it's a little bit bright. So what we can do here is we can make our own version of the torch by going to the details pane, going to the blueprint button and going create child blueprint class. And I'm going to call mine the torch, and then we usually put the modification after it. So BP torch underscore dungeon. So this is going to be my dungeon torch. And we're going to place this in the root of content and click select. So that creates the torch. We don't actually need it open, but we can go ahead back into our level, and there's the torch right there. I'm just going to change my grid snapping units to 10 so that I can correctly place it on the wall, right, like so. So we've got our torch attached to the wall, and what I wanted to do is to modify a couple of properties of the light. If you have a look at the torch blueprint, you can see
I
it's made
did
up of a
that
number of
already,
components.
but not
One of
here.
them is the mesh of the torch itself, one of them is the point light, and one is the fire. I want to change a few properties about the point light because it's not quite set up how I want it to. For example, it's not casting a shadow with this pillar, and that's because of the way this point light is set up. If we go down into the properties, you can see there is a cast shadows property that's unchecked. Let's check that first. There you go. We've now got some shadowing going on in our scene. Unfortunately, it's got this really ugly shadow here from the torch itself. So what we can do to correct just that is to select the torch SM torch mesh and then scroll down to its property or search for its property called shadow. And you can see that there is a dynamic shadow and static shadow. We can uncheck both of these, and you can see that it's no longer got that ugly shadow. It's now just casting a nice light and shadowing with the pillars and with the scene around us. Now, the next thing to do when we go back to that torch light component is to just cancel out the search and have a look at some of the other lighting properties we've got here. One of them is the intensity. I think it's too bright, so I'm going to start by taking it down by a factor of 10 to 500. And for me, that just feels like a much more moody, ambient light for a crypt and a dungeon, so I'm going to go with that. And go back to the torchlight again, and then there's the attenuation radius. This means how far can this torch cast its light, and actually making it smaller, making the attenuation radius smaller, has good performance impact because it's having to compute less shadowing. So I'm going to make it as small as I think is reasonable, which is just about, I think 800 units is a good attenuation radius for me. And now all these properties, I've been making them here in the outliner, but if I wanted them to apply to all instances of my BP Dungeon Torch, so if I went to Content Browser and brought in the BP Torch, you can see this one's really, really bright. So let's select the one that I've actually modified and made all those modifications to, and I'll go to the Blueprint button again, and this time I'm going to select Apply Instance Changes to Blueprint. And that's going to make it so that all of the blueprints now match those changes that I just made. So that's what I'm going to do. You can obviously blueprint, and that's going to make it so that all of the blueprints now match those changes. I'm going to, which you can see this to good performance impact because it's having to compute less shadowing. So I'm going to make it as small as I think is reasonable, which is just about, I think, 800 units is a good attenuation radius for me. And now all these properties, I've been making them here in the outliner, but if I wanted them to apply to all instances of my BP Dungeon Torch, so if I went to Content Browser and brought in the BP Torch, you can see this one's really, really bright. So let's select the one that I've actually modified and made all those modifications to. And I'll go to the Blueprint button again, and this time I'm going to select Apply Instance Changes to Blueprint. And that's going to make it so that all of the blueprints now match those changes that I just made. So that's what I'm going to do. You can obviously choose to set things up differently with your lighting. I'm going to add in a few more torches here to light my scene. I think another one on this pillar. I'm just going to drag it in and rotate it about 180 degrees. Seems to be well placed in the wall already. And then these little alcoves here are a bit dark, so I'm just going to switch to the unlit mode, place a torch on the wall and rotate it by 180 degrees, and then do the same on the flip wall. And then let's preview this in the lit scene. So you can see how it slowly adapts the lighting. This is both Lumen taking its time to work out the light calculations, and also the other thing that's going on here is that there's a little bit of exposure compensation going on so that it can handle very bright outdoor scenes, and indoor scenes it can change the exposure for. So I'm happy mostly with how this is lit. If we wanted to, we could put a chandelier in here. That's another blueprint that we've got. So we can search for the BP chandelier in the content drawer, then we can bring it in and place it up here above. And the chandelier works a little bit differently. It's actually got some properties on the actor. So if you select the actor level of the blueprint, go to the details pane, and then check the add point light, you can see that it adds indeed a light for that chandelier. And we can change some of the properties of that light here. So we could change the intensity if we wanted to. We can change the attenuation radius. I think it's definitely too small. I'm going to change that to 1000, like so. So that kind of fills the room with a little bit more light from that chandelier up the top. So you could use a combination of the chandelier lights, the torch lights on your walls, and so on to light up the rest of your level. So that's going to be your challenge. Have a little bit of fun with it, lighting your level, use some torches and chandeliers, experiment with the mood, create some blueprints for different configurations of lighting. So if you want to have different torches down in the crypt that are even dimmer, you could create a different child blueprint for that. And similarly with the chandelier, if you wanted to change the properties and use those properties in multiple locations, you could do that too. There's always the option of bringing in just point lights and spotlights and area lights if you want those as well, without any associated meshes. Then you could just use that for lighting the specific elements of your level if there's things you want to draw attention to. And we'll be doing that a little bit later on in the section with some other elements in my level. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to basically fast forward through this. It's going to be more of the same, just me placing down these actors to light the level. So that's me done. Let's go and have a little run through the level and I'll show you what I've done. Nothing's changed here in the main portion of the level. There's one light down here in the corridor. I wanted to keep it quite dark and mysterious for the great reveal. And I'm noticing it's not quite aligned as I wanted it to be, so I'm going to move it a bit more centrally like so. Then we go into the corridor and we're keeping it nice and dark and moody in here. We've got the door at the other end. I'm still not happy with the fact that there's so much light bleeding through this door. But, well, we'll find a way to solve that another time, or I might not, but you might polish things off a little bit better than I'm polishing things. So here we go. I had to put a light here so that it would illuminate this little feature piece. Then we can come down the corridor and we see the open door, and we come in to our nicely lit mausoleum, which has got a couple of torches on either side and a nice chandelier so that it's very well lit, because this is going to be an important room for us to understand what's going on and to see the railings that shut, etc. So that's it. That is my lighting done, and I will see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome. In this lecture we're going to be setting up a game mode and a custom player pawn so that we can walk around our level as a first-person player, ready to play some gameplay mechanics. Let's dive in and see how this works. So we've already seen how when I hit play, I just go straight through the floor here. So we kind of want to fix that so that we can play inside our level without fear of falling through floors. So the problem is that this SM floor mesh does not have any collision set up on it. So we can hit the Browse to SM Floor in Content Browser button, we can open up the SM Mesh editor and dock it to the main window. And then we can go to the Show button and hit Show.
Should I be scared? The feeling's so different now. You got me floating here, a feather in the air. Oh, but when the wind blows, will I tumble or sail away? Or would you have me stay? And what if I escape? I know I'm spinning in a vicious cycle. I'm scared of doing something I'll regret. Maybe this is right, but I'm still staring at your silhouette. But what if you're everything I need? A fire in my heart, the air I breathe. What if I'm incomplete without you by my side? What if I go against my heart instead of confessing from the start? What if I miss out on the life meant for us? I need you by my side, by your side. I'm not afraid. We found something that'll never fade. We can be ourselves and figure out the rest along the way. What if you're everything I need? A fire in my heart, the air I breathe. What if I'm incomplete without you by my side? What if I go against my heart instead of confessing from the start? What if I miss out on the life meant for us? I need you by my side. I need you by my side. I need you by my side.
Move there. And then what we want to do is create a new default game mode and set this player as and create a child blueprint class. So I'm going to have to open these doors a smidge more. Okay, so now that those doors are wider, we should be able to fit through them no problem, and we do. And we can now walk around our level as large it is, and the Z extent is 0. So let's make that 10 centimeters to add box simplified collision, which automatically.
Or this is the material.
We add it around the mesh. Now, just to make sure we don't fall through this floor, I want to make that box a little bit thicker. At the moment, it's kind of 0 thickness. So what we can do is go in the details pane, scroll on down, where we're going to find the primitives collision section, and then under it there is primitives. And this tells us, this shows us the different primitives that make up the collisions. And some of the primitives are things like spheres, boxes, capsules, etc. We've got boxes. So let's open up the box. We can see its center is here. We can see the rotation. We can see the extent, which basically means how large it is. And the Z extent is 0. So let's make that 10 centimeters instead. So you can see that's made the box slightly thicker. But I don't want our character to be standing on top of the floor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change its center to be at -10.